choice. Go to a school that's actually teaching. The NEA and the AFT are powerful forces. But if they only remain so, I think they only will remain so, if Americans continue to believe that public education is still worthwhile. By refusing to teach, by politicizing curricula, by jeopardizing our children's mental and physical well-being, they're showing us how non-essential they're becoming. And that's the angle. Joining me now is David Henderson, Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution. David, could unions actually be putting themselves out of business permanently with these charades?
I think so, and the reason is that what will happen, I think, is a lot of parents, potentially millions of parents, will figure out when they're going to do these learning pods, various things where they get a few kids together. I think they're going to figure out how mediocre the public school system is on average.
Well, when you see that teachers, through the union reps, are now trying to dictate the terms of even their online teaching, I literally thought that was something from The Onion or something, a total joke. They're not going to go to class because they're worried about the virus. Okay, even if you disagree with that, okay. But now they don't want to actually teach online either. So what's the point of having these public schools in these circumstances? And look, I come from a family of teachers, and I really appreciate great teachers. I went to public schools. I had fabulous teachers in Connecticut, loved my teachers. But this now is just pulling the curtain back on all of this.
Yes, it is. And so I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal today saying there could be a renaissance in K through 12 education, because when this ends, whenever it ends, or when it's seen to end, a lot of parents, I think, will not want to go back to those mediocre schools, and I mean pre-pandemic mediocre schools, and they might want to continue homeschooling. There's polling data that says 40.8% of parents are inclined to homeschool when this ends. I think that's overstated, but even if a third of them do, the number of homeschool kids would almost quadruple. And then there are also charter schools. Those things are thousands of dollars cheaper per student per year. And so I think a lot of parents will start pushing for those. People who've been kind of passive about this might start pushing to have charter schools.
Yeah, Catholic schools as well. A lot of them are
Yes.
bucking this no in-person teaching and understand the importance of parent involvement, but teacher to student interaction. It's so essential if you're going to go that route. Listen to what
Yes.
Biden said when he was addressing the National Education Association earlier this month.
There's a bottom line here. When we win this election, we're going to get the support you need and the respect you deserve. You don't just have a partner in the White House. You'll have an NEA member in the White House.
Oh, wow.
David, that is a shocking admission in any election, but particularly now that the unions are striking really against the kids. They're striking against kids at this point.
Yes, and so of course the problem is the standard problem with unions, that it's very hard to fire someone who doesn't perform. You put union and government together and you've got those two problems multiplying each other, and that is very hard. That's why charter schools, that's one reason charter schools are very good. It's much easier to get rid of non-performing teachers, and it tends to attract teachers who really want to teach.
Well, if you're an essential employee, which they are essential employees, they, unless they have a severe comorbidity, they shouldn't, or extremely vulnerable. I don't understand how they get away with any of this. But this is the governors and the mayors and Larry Hogan in Maryland and Ralph Northam in Virginia. Both of them are complete outrages. I'm getting parents calling me morning, noon, and night, also in D.C., of course. And this is where parents of all backgrounds, races, ethnicities, all have to work together to say, no, we don't accept this, or go a different direction altogether. David, your piece was fantastic. I'll make sure to tweet it out. Thanks so much. And reopening schools isn't just about education. It's about preventing other public health crises, one that the CDC director, Robert Redfield, recently said is beginning to rear its ugly head among high schoolers.
But there has been another cost that we've seen, particularly in high schools. We're seeing, sadly, far greater suicides now than we are deaths from COVID. we're seeing far greater deaths from drug overdose that are above excess that we had as background than we are seeing deaths from COVID. So this is why coming back for the overall social being of the individuals.
Joining me now is Phil Kerpen, president of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Phil, I mean, you feel that pain in your heart when you hear those comments. Anyone, and we've all in some way have been touched by, these horrific stories of suicide, and people don't like to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. But we have to talk about it in relation to these school closures because it is a real problem of isolation and desperation. That's a shocking admission from Redfield.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible because a lot of us predicted this might happen, and unfortunately it appears that it has happened. And of course, suicide, self-harm is the #2 cause of death among teenagers after accidents. It kills thousands a year. When you're comparing it to a virus that kills tens a year in that age bracket, even a tiny increase in the percentage is going to be a much bigger number. And we thought that might happen, and now has happened. And Laura, the insane thing to me is this is a big deal, and the CDC is not touting it from a platform. They're not going to the White House podium. They're not going on a show like yours and saying it. He said this on a tiny webcast from a dark office with a shadow on half his face. He sounded tired. Nobody even noticed this for a week or two. Like this was just some throwaway thing. This is a big deal, and it's really devastating that we're doing this to children in this country over a virus that by and large doesn't threaten them. He said in the same interview that it's a 1 in a million risk that this virus will kill a child, that flu is 5 to 10 times more dangerous. Same interview, he said that. He's not saying these things he's not screaming them from the rafters, he's not posting on their website, he's not saying them from the podium at the White House, but he's saying them on this web interview.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Okay. Yeah, Phil, thank you for saying that, because if we're going to do these coronavirus briefings every day, fine, and we get some information, but you got to look at the whole patient. If America is the patient, you can't just look at what the virus does. You have to look at the jobs lost, you have to look at the livelihoods destroyed, alcoholism, desperation, depression, suicide. I think Fauci and all these people have to answer those questions, because they're not looking at the whole patient. They're looking at one aspect, very narrow aspect. It's important, but so are these. There's a new study out of Germany that found exposure to children may make adults less likely to contract COVID-19. Now, the study reads that certain childhood infections might provide partial immunity against COVID-19 and thereby potentially could reduce the need for ICU therapy in adults. Now, the study hasn't been peer-reviewed yet, so we want to be cautious, but it certainly sounds interesting at the very least, and just as plausible as any of these other things we're hearing.
Wouldn't that be an unbelievable irony after all of these strikes and these demands and all of this stuff from these teachers, if it turns out that being around children is actually protective, that the childhood colds and other illnesses they have are challenges to the immune system of adults that protect them from future COVID infection? And we have seen several other studies suggesting that may be the case. That would be kind of the ultimate irony, I think, if school closures endangered not just children through what Dr. Redfield was talking about, but maybe school closures endangered teachers as well by denying them access to children that tends to be protective.
Phil, we're not going to let this issue go. No way. Thank you so much. And while the